So imagine just for a second that a massive tech giant, let's say Amazon or Google, didn't just dominate the stock market.
Right.
Imagine if they actually bought the U.S. Army, took over the IRS so they could collect taxes directly from you, and then over the course of about 80 years, legally and militarily acquired the entire country, state by state.
It sounds like the plot of a dystopian sci-fi novel.
Hmm.
Or maybe a fever dream of a corporate CEO.
It really does. But that is, without any exaggeration, the true story of the British in India. I think we often picture the British Empire as, Queen Victoria sending troops across the globe to conquer a subcontinent.
Right, the Grand Imperial March.
Exactly. But for the first 100 years, the British government wasn't actually running the show. It was a corporation.
A publicly traded company.
Yes, with shareholders and dividends and a private army that eventually became, twice the size of the British Royal Army?
Easily. The East India Company was the original too-big-to-fail corporate giant.
Which brings us to one of the fiercest, most provocative debates in history. Did this company conquer a whole civilization by accident? Was it, as the historian John Seeley famously put it, a conquest done in a fit of absent-mindedness?
Like they just tripped, fell, and accidentally landed on an empire.
Right. Or was this the longest, coldest, most calculated game of geopolitical chess ever played?
It is the ultimate historical cold case. And the answer, as we are going to see today, is terrifyingly brilliant. Because it wasn't just superior gunpowder. It was compound interest.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't just battles. It was breach of contract. It was this incredible mix of superior violence and slick corporate law.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we are unpacking the corporate takeover of India. I'm joined by our expert guide to help us navigate the fine print of history.
It's great to be here. This is a massive topic. I mean, literally the turning point that shaped the modern world.
It really is. But before we jump into the muskets and the treaties, we have some very specific, high-priority housekeeping. We need to be completely clear here. This deep dive is a comprehensive summary designed specifically for UPSC preparation.
Right.
It is brought to you and focused by the Simplified UPSC by PTP YouTube channel.
That's right. We are going deep, but we are keeping it relevant to the syllabus. This isn't just history for entertainment. This is high-yield material for your exams.
Absolutely. So here is our humble request. If you are finding value in this deep breakdown, please go and subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP channel right now. It is the fuel that keeps this engine running.
And if you are in a position to help keep the lights on and the research going, please consider supporting the mission on Patreon. That support really allows for the creation of this super useful, dense content.
A massive, genuine shout out to all the current supporters, by the way. You guys are the real MVPs making this possible.
Definitely. Also, don't be a passive listener. Engagement matters. Like the video, share your valuable comments. It helps the algorithm get this knowledge to other aspirants who are struggling with this massive syllabus.
And finally, resources. Because I know you guys want the notes, free notes with practice PYQs. That's previous year questions are available right now on the public Telegram channel. But if you want the VIP experience...
The Governor General treatment.
Exactly. If you want access to all the videos in this series at once, along with organized premium notes, and we're talking detailed summaries, extra PYQs, and model mains answers for those tough, subjective questions you need to join the private Telegram library.
Just DM on the public Telegram channel to get access.
Okay, housekeeping complete. Let's open the file.
Let's do it.
We are breaking down Chapter 5 of Spectrum's A Brief History of Modern India, the expansion and consolidation of British power in India. We have a lot of ground to cover. We're going from the philosophy of conquest to the specific battles in Bengal, Mysore, the Maratha lands, Sindh, and Punjab.
And we can't forget the tools they used. The software of empire, like the Subsidiary alliance.
The fine print that enslaved a continent. So let's start with that debate I mentioned at the top, the accident versus design theory. John Seeley argues the British conquered India in a fit of absent-mindedness. That kind of paints a picture of a bumbling trader who just wanted to sell spices but kept getting attacked. Is there any actual truth to that?
So Seeley represents the classic imperial apology. The narrative goes something like this. We were just peaceful traders. We just wanted to buy cotton and silk. But these local Indian warlords kept attacking our warehouses, so we had to build forts to protect our goods.
Right.
Then they attacked the forts, so we had to hire an army. Then they attacked the army, so we had to take over their government.
Look what you made me do.
Precisely. It frames the British as victims of circumstance. And, to be perfectly fair, there is a tiny grain of truth to it. The board of directors sitting back in London often wrote these angry letters to their officers in India saying, "Start fighting wars. Wars are expensive. Just send us the profits."
Because they were a business.
Exactly. They didn't initially want to govern. Governing is a hassle. It
Right.
costs money to run a police force and a court system. They just wanted dividends.
But then you have the other school of thought, people like Judith Brown. They argue that you cannot separate trade from power in the 18th century.
Correct. You have to remember, this was the age of mercantilism. Trade wasn't free, it was armed. If you wanted to buy textiles in Bengal cheaply, you needed to bully the local weaver so he wouldn't sell to the French or the Dutch.
Right, you need leverage.
To bully the weaver, you needed to intimidate the local official. To intimidate the official, you needed guns. So the ambition of the men on the ground, people like Robert Clive, was not absent-minded at all. It was ferociously ambitious.
They wanted to get rich.
They wanted personal wealth, and they realized very quickly that political power was the absolute fastest way to get it.
So it's a classic principal-agent problem. The shareholders in London want quiet profits, but the agents in India, the company officers, they want glory and loot.
That's a great way to put it. And over a period of about 80 years, roughly from the 1740s to 1818, the company transformed. It's hard to pin a single date on when the British period officially began. Some say it started with the Anglo-French rivalry in 1740.
Some point to the Battle of Plassey in 1757.
Or even the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761, which weakened the Marathas. But the key insight is that it was a transition from a trading outpost to a sovereign state.
Let's look at the how. Because on paper, honestly, this makes no sense. You have the Mughal Empire, which sure is in decline, but it's still massive. You have the Marathas, who are fierce warriors. How does a corporate militia defeat them? What was the British secret sauce?
Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was an entire system. We can really break it down into 3 buckets: military, economic, and social.
Let's hit the military first. Was it really just better guns?
The guns helped, definitely. Their muskets fired faster, and their field artillery was lighter and much more mobile. But the real weapon was the mindset, specifically discipline.
What do you mean by that?
The British fought in formation, they held the line, they had absolute civil discipline, a fair selection system for their officers.
And Indian armies didn't?
Indian armies were often massive, sometimes 5 or 10 times the size of the British force, but they were loose collections of individuals. They relied entirely on the heroic leader.
Okay, paint a picture of that.
So imagine you have a general like Haidar Ali sitting on an elephant. Everyone fights bravely as long as they can physically see him. But if that general gets shot, or if his elephant just panics and turns around...
The army thinks he's dead.
Exactly. Panic sets in instantly. The entire army just dissolves and runs away. It's a very hero-centric model.
And the British?
The British used a system-centric model. If the colonel dies, the major takes over immediately. If the major dies, the captain takes over. The machine just keeps grinding forward. It's impersonal, and that makes it incredibly resilient.
So they had a deep bench.
Yes, that's the second-line leadership concept. They didn't just rely on a Robert Clive. They had Eyre Coote, Lord Lake, Arthur Wellesley, brilliant leaders supported by a whole structure of capable officers.
But there is a boring, unsexy economic factor that you've mentioned to me before, which is actually more important than the guns.
Oh, the paycheck.
The paycheck.
It sounds trivial now, but it was completely revolutionary in 18th century India. The British paid salaries regularly, in cash, on the first of the month.
Why does that matter so much in the middle of a war?
Contrast this with Indian rulers. Their treasuries were often empty because of poor revenue collection. They relied on harvest taxes, so they hired mercenaries, Arabs, Rohillas, Pindaris. But they would often fall months and months behind on wages.
Oh, wow.
Now imagine you're a mercenary, you haven't been paid in 3 months, the battle is getting intense. The enemy rides over and offers you a bag of gold to switch sides right then and there. What do?
I take the gold. Or I just run away so I can live to fight another day for someone who will actually pay me.
Exactly. Loyalty in Indian armies was transactional and very fragile because the financial plumbing was broken. The British, on the other hand, had strong financial backup. They had the Bank of England. They had the London stock market.
The leveraged debt.
They could borrow millions of pounds at a 3% interest rate to fund a war, pay their soldiers on time, and completely destroy an enemy who was paying 30% interest to local moneylenders just to buy grain for their horses.
That is incredible. We focus so much on the battlefield tactics, but it was really a victory of financial capitalism.
It was the fiscal military state in action. Money wins wars. And finally, there's the issue of nationalism, or rather the lack of it at the time.
This is a sensitive point for a lot of people, but we really need to unpack it based on the sources.
We look back today and we ask, why did Indian soldiers help the British conquer India? Because the vast majority of the company's army, the sepoys, were Indian. But we have to realize that in 1750, there was no India in the unified political sense. A soldier from Awadh felt no loyalty whatsoever to a ruler in Bengal. They were foreigners to him. A Sikh soldier had no love for the Mughal emperor in Delhi.
So the British were just another employer on the market.
Exactly. And as we just established, they were the best-paying employer. The British actually used this brilliantly. They used India's diversity against itself. The British soldier fought for king and country, this abstract concept of nationalist pride. The Indian soldier fought for his salt, his pay, and his specific regiment.
That is a tough pill to swallow, but it explains so much of how the mechanics actually worked. So let's see this machine in action. The first big prize on the board, Bengal, the cash cow.
Bengal was the absolute jewel. It was the richest province in the declining Mughal Empire. Just to give you a sense of scale, Bengal accounted for 60% of British imports from Asia.
60%.
Silk, textiles, saltpeter for making gunpowder. It was incredibly wealthy. But the company was acting like a parasite.
How so? Set the scene on the eve of the conquest.
So you had strong rulers initially, like Allahabad Khan, who kept the Europeans in check. But the friction came from these trade permits called dastaks.
Right, the dastaks.
These were imperial passes that allowed the company to trade duty-free. But it was only meant for the company's official exports. What actually happened was that the company officials, the individuals, were using them for their own private side hustles.
So they were basically smuggling.
Exactly. They were trading salt and betel nut locally, flashing the company pass, and refusing to pay local taxes.
So the local ruler, the Nawab, is bleeding massive amounts of revenue.
Massive. So when Allahabad Khan dies, his grandson, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, takes over. He's young, he's a bit hot-headed, but he's essentially right about the law. He decides to crack down. He demands the British stop abusing the passes and stop fortifying Calcutta without permission.
And the British ignore him.
They ignore him. So Siraj seizes the British factory at Qasim Bazar and then marches on and takes Calcutta itself. And this event leads to the infamous Black Hole tragedy.
Okay, this is a huge propaganda point in British history, right? Let's clarify what the sources actually say about this.
It's massive. The story told by a British survivor, Holwell, was that Siraj locked 146 British prisoners in a tiny dungeon room about 18 by 14 feet, and by morning 123 had died of suffocation.
That sounds horrific.
It does, but modern historians, and even contemporaries at the time, debated those numbers heavily. It was physically impossible to fit that many people in that space. It was likely much fewer, maybe 60 prisoners and around 40 deaths. Still terrible, but heavily exaggerated.
But the exact truth didn't really matter back in London, did it?
No, not at all. The story gave the British the absolute moral outrage they needed. It was their Remember the Alamo. It justified every brutal thing that came next.
Enter Robert Clive, the Avenger.
Clive comes up from Madras with a fleet and troops. But Clive is cunning. He doesn't just want a fair fight. He knows Siraj has a massive army. Clive wants a guarantee. So the Battle of Plassey in 1757 wasn't really a battle at all. It was a transaction.
A fixed match?
100%. Clive found the Nawab's own commander-in-chief, Mir Jafar, and basically made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Stand down, let us win, and we will make you the Nawab.
Wow.
He also brought in the rich bankers of Bengal, the Jagat-Seths, who were tired of Siraj's volatility and wanted stability for their businesses.
So on the actual day of the battle,
Siraj-ud-Dowlah orders the attack. Mir Jafar, who is commanding the largest flank of the army, just stands there. He literally folds his arms. Siraj realizes he's been completely betrayed and flees. The British win the Battle of Plassey with barely a scratch.
and Mir Jafar gets his throne. But he's a puppet, right?
He's a puppet with strings attached directly to his wallet. The British demand massive payments, war reparations, they called it. The company gets the zamindari rights, basically the landlord tax collection rights of the 24 Parganas district. Mir Jafar empties his treasury to pay them.
And when he runs out of money,
He becomes useless to them. So in 1760, the British just swap him out. They replace him with his son-in-law, Mir Qasim.
but here's the twist, right? Mir Qasim wasn't just another pushover.
No, Mir Qasim was actually highly competent. He wanted to be a real king, not a puppet. He paid off the company's debts, but then he moved his capital to Munger to get as far away from the British spies in Calcutta as possible. He started rebuilding his army along European lines.
And then he does something radical regarding the trade duties.
He saw the British were still abusing their tax-free dastaks, ruining local merchants. So Mir Qasim said, fine, If the British won't pay taxes, nobody pays taxes. He completely abolished all transit duties for everyone, Indian merchants included.
He leveled the playing field.
He did, and the British were absolutely furious.
Wait, why? Didn't they want free trade?
No, they didn't want free trade, they wanted a monopoly. They wanted an unfair advantage over the locals. This loss of their special privilege leads straight to the real showdown, the Battle of Buxar in 1764.
Now, Buxar feels very different from Plassey. Plassey was basically a heist. Buxar sounds like an actual war.
Buxar is the real deal. Mir Qasim flees to Awadh and forms a grand alliance. He gets the Nawab of Awadh, Shuja-ud-Dawla, and he gets the Mughal emperor himself, Shah Alam II.
This is the cream of the crop of Indian power.
3 major rulers combining their forces against a trading company.
And they lost.
They lost decisively. Major Hector Munro, leading the British forces, crushed the combined Indian army. This wasn't treachery or bribery, this was pure military superiority. And it sent a massive shockwave through the entire subcontinent. The British had just defeated the Mughal emperor.
And the aftermath of this is the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765. This is where the British officially transition into being the government, right?
Effectively, yes. Robert Clive comes back to India to negotiate the treaty. He forces the emperor to grant the Diwani rights to the company for Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
Explain Diwani rights.
Diwani means the right to collect the land revenue. So now the British are officially the tax collectors for the richest province in India.
But they don't take responsibility for actually running the place, do they?
No, that's the sinister genius of the dual government system from 1765 to 1772. The British have the Diwani, the money, and the military power. The local Nawab is left with the Nizamat, the responsibility for police, justice, and administration.
But the Nawab has no money to pay for any of that because the British took it all.
Exactly. It was power without responsibility for the British and responsibility without power for the Nawab.
That sounds like a recipe for total disaster.
It was the ultimate looting scheme. It completely stripped Bengal of its wealth, destroyed its local economy, and when the terrible famine of 1770 hit, millions of people died, perhaps 1/3 of the population of Bengal, because the company didn't care to offer relief. They just kept ruthlessly collecting their revenue.
Wow.
It was so disastrous and embarrassing that eventually Warren Hastings had to step in, end the dual system in 1772, and take full direct control.
So the East is secured. The British have their cash cow. Now they look south, and they hit a massive wall, a wall named Mysore.
Mysore was the toughest nut to crack. Under the old Wudiyar dynasty, it was a bit weak, but then rose Haidar Ali. He started as a simple horseman in the army, and through sheer brilliance, rose to become the ruler. And Haidar Ali, along with his son Tipu Sultan, were probably the only Indian rulers who truly understood what the British actually were.
What did they see that all the other rulers missed?
Most Indian rulers saw the British as just another local rival, like the Marathas or the Nizam of Hyderabad. Haidar Ali saw them as an existential threat. He realized that the British power came from their modern system, so he aggressively tried to copy it.
He modernized.
He built a modern army with French help. He established a state-controlled economy to fund it, and he was a brilliant diplomat. During the First Anglo-Mysore War, from 1767 to 69, Haidar Ali actually managed to isolate the British. He turned the Marathas and the Nizam against them.
Oh, he played their own game.
He did. He marched his army right up to the very gates of Madras. The British were completely terrified. They had to sue for peace.
That's the Treaty of Madras, which is a rare British defeat.
It was. It was a treaty of mutual restitution, meaning everyone gives back what they took in a defensive pact. If anyone attacks Haidar, the British promise to help him. But the British have a very long memory and almost zero honor when it comes to treaties in India.
Let me guess, they broke it.
A few years later, the Marathas attacked Mysore. Haidar called for British help, and the British just sat there and refused. Haidar Ali never, ever forgave that betrayal.
And that resentment leads right into the Second Anglo-Mysore War.
Right, from 1780 to 84.
Yeah.
And the global context here is huge. This is happening during the American War of Independence.
Right.
The French are fighting the British globally, so they are actively helping Mysore in India. Now, Haidar Ali actually died during this war, not in battle, but from cancer. And his son, Tipu Sultan, took over seamlessly.
The Tiger of Mysore.
Tipu is a fascinating historical figure. The British propaganda painted him as a religious fanatic and a barbaric tyrant. But if you look at the historical records, he was a deep modernist. He introduced sericulture silk farming to Mysore. He tried to build a modern navy. And we absolutely have to talk about the rockets.
Yes, the Mysorean rockets.
So most rockets in the world at the time were basically cardboard tubes, glorified fireworks. Tipu's engineers put the gunpowder inside cast iron casings.
Which completely changes the physics.
Exactly. It allowed them to hold much more powder, generate higher pressure, and fly significantly further up to 2 kilometers.
Yeah.
They were essentially flying artillery that you didn't need heavy wheels to transport. They rained fire on the British cavalry.
The British must have been stunned.
They were so impressed and terrified that after they eventually defeated Tipu, they stole the technology, took the rockets back to the arsenal in London, reverse engineered them, and they became the basis for the Congreve rocket used in the Napoleonic Wars.
Wait, is that the rocket's red glare in the American national anthem?
The very same. That technology originated in Mysore.
That is mind-blowing.
But Tipu's ultimate problem was that he was alone. This brings us to the tragedy of the divided House of India. The Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad hated Mysore more than they feared the British.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. So in the Third Anglo-Mysore War from 1790 to 92, the British general Lord Cornwallis, the exact same Cornwallis who surrendered to George Washington in America, he managed to get the Marathas and the Nizam to gang up on Tipu. They surrounded his capital. Tipu had to sign the Treaty of Seringapatam.
And this is where a really brutal personal tragedy comes in for Tipu.
It's heart-wrenching. To ensure Tipu paid the massive war indemnity of 3 crore rupees, Cornwallis took 2 of Tipu's young sons as hostages.
Oh, man.
Imagine the humiliation. The Tiger of Mysore had to bow down and hand over his children just to save his kingdom.
But he didn't give up, did he?
No, Tipu was relentless. He tried to forge an international anti-British alliance. He wrote letters to the Ottoman Empire. He even joined the Jacobin Club, the French revolutionaries.
Wait, Tipu Sultan was a French revolutionary.
He planted a tree of liberty in his capital and literally called himself Citizen Tipu. He was hoping Napoleon, who was campaigning in Egypt at the time, would march to India and come to his aid.
I can see why that terrified the British.
It did. Lord Wellesley, who was a hardcore, unapologetic imperialist, arrived in India as Governor-General in 1798. He saw Tipu as a dangerous French asset. He launched the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War in 1799.
This was the final stand.
It was short and brutal. Tipu refused to surrender or become a puppet. He famously said, "Better to live a day as a lion than a lifetime as a sheep." He died sword in hand, fighting at the gates of his capital, Seringapatam.
With Tipu gone, the south was wide open. But what about the center of the country? The Marathas. From what I understand, they were supposed to be the next big thing, the natural successors to the Mughal Empire.
The Marathas were incredibly formidable, but they had a fatal structural flaw. They weren't a unified, centralized empire. They were a confederacy.
Like a loose alliance.
Right. You had the Peshwa, who was technically the prime minister and head of the Confederacy in Pune. But then you have these powerful, independent warlord families. The Sindhis in Gwalior, the Holkars in Indore, the Gaekwads in Baroda, and the Bansals in Nagpur.
So too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
Literally. They were constantly infighting for dominance. The British entry into Maratha politics is a textbook case of taking advantage of a succession dispute.
How did it start?
In the First Anglo-Maratha War, from 1775 to 82, the British supported a guy named Raghunathro, who desperately wanted to be Peshwa, but was rejected by the Maratha ministers, led by the brilliant Nana Fadnavis.
But the Marathas actually held their own in that first war, didn't they?
They did. They used scorched earth tactics and forced the British into the Treaty of Salbai in 1782, which basically hit pause and gave them 20 years of peace.
But then the cracks reappeared.
Yes, with the next Peshwa, Bajiral VII.
The outline notes describe him as worthless, which is a pretty strong word for a historical text.
It's entirely accurate, though. He was incompetent, treacherous, and deeply paranoid. In 1802, he got into a civil war with the Holkar family, one of his own chiefs. Bajiral lost, panicked, and fled to the British for protection. He basically said, "Save my throne and I'll do whatever you want."
And he signed the Treaty of Bassein.
This treaty is the absolute turning point. The Peshwa, the theoretical head of the entire Maratha Confederacy, accepted a British subsidiary force. He completely surrendered his foreign policy. He essentially sold the independence of the Marathas just to save his own skin. It gave the English the key to India.
The other Maratha chiefs, Scindia, Bonsley, they must have gone ballistic when they found out.
They did. They realized the Peshwa had just sold them all out to the foreigners. So they went to war in the Second Anglo-Maratha War from 1803 to 1805.
Did they fight together?
No. And that was their doom. They fought separately. Scindia fought Arthur Wellesley at Assaye and lost. Then Bonsall fought and lost. If they had united their massive armies, they might have crushed the British. But divided, they were picked off one by one.
So by 1818, the Third Anglo-Maratha War, it's all over.
Yes. The British hunted down the Pindaris, who were mercenary bands attached to Maratha armies, and used that as an excuse to mop up the rest of the Maratha chiefs. The Peshwaship was officially abolished. The Maratha Empire was completely dissolved.
And the reason they lost is crucial for our listeners to grasp. It wasn't just a lack of unity, was it?
No, it was information warfare.
Explain that.
The British had spies everywhere. They had these diplomats called residents stationed in every Maratha court. The British knew the internal Maratha politics better than the Marathas did. They knew exactly whose loyalty could be bought, who hated who.
And the Marathas?
The Marathas knew almost nothing about British capabilities, their finances, or global geopolitics. They were fighting in a local bubble, while the British were playing a global game. Superior espionage beats superior cavalry.
Wow. So we have the east secured with Bengal, the south with Mysore, and the center with the Marathas. Now let's look west. This brings us to a particularly nasty chapter, Sindh.
Sindh is where the British mask completely falls off.
Usually the British tried to find some legal excuse, right? Oh, you broke a treaty, or you are misgoverning your people.
Exactly. In Sindh, they didn't even bother with a good excuse.
Ugh.
The context here is the fear of Russia, the great game.
The British were paranoid that the Russian Empire would expand south and invade India through Afghanistan and Sindh.
Right, but the emirs of Sindh were actually very compliant. They had signed a treaty of eternal friendship with the company. They let British troops pass through their territory during the Afghan War. They paid the tolls. They did everything they were asked.
So why invade them in 1843?
Because the British had just suffered a massive, humiliating defeat in Afghanistan. They needed a quick win to restore their prestige in the eyes of the Indian princes. They needed a punching bag.
And Sindh was convenient.
So General Charles Napier basically provoked a war for absolutely no reason. He marched his troops in, forced new humiliating treaties, and when the local Malojis finally rebelled, he crushed them.
And he knew it was legally and morally wrong, didn't he?
Oh, he openly admitted it. He wrote in his diary, "We have no right to seize Sindh, yet we shall do so." A very advantageous, useful, humane piece of rascality.
Humane rascality. That is quite the euphemism for an illegal, unprovoked invasion.
It was pure, naked imperial bullying. They annexed it in 1843 just because they could.
Moving north from Sindh, we hit Punjab, the land of the Sikhs, and this is the era of Ranjit Singh.
Ranjit Singh is a true legend of Indian history. He took these scattered Sikh confederacies, the Missals, and united them into a powerful modern empire. And he was incredibly smart. He knew he couldn't beat the British machine in an all-out war.
So he made a deal.
In 1809, he signed the Treaty of Amritsar. It basically drew a line in the sand down the Sutlej River. Ranjit Singh said, "I won't cross this river to the east, and you don't cross it to the west."
And amazingly, it worked. As long as he was alive, the British respected that boundary.
Because he was too strong to mess with.
Precisely. He built a massive, fiercely trained army called the Khalsa.
But then he died in 1839, and what happens next is just chaos. It's a classic Game of Thrones scenario. Assassinations, weak rulers, multiple succession crises. Within a few years, the Khalsa army became the real power behind the throne.
Yeah.
They were highly patriotic, but they were restless and suspicious of the British.
And the British see this chaos and start moving troops up to the border.
Which provokes the Khalsa. They cross the Sutlej, and the First Anglo-Sikh War kicks off in 1845.
Now, from what I've read, the Sikh soldiers were incredibly tough.
They were arguably the best soldiers in all of Asia at that time. At the Battle of Firoz Shah, the British were on the absolute brink of total collapse. It was a bloodbath. The British Governor-General was actually burning his state papers because he thought they were going to have to surrender.
So why on earth did the Sikhs lose the war?
Betrayal. High-level catastrophic treason.
By who?
The top Sikh commanders, Lal Singh and Teja Singh. They were secretly communicating with the British the entire time. They deliberately held back their troops when they had the advantage. They refused to send gunpowder to their own men. They ordered inexplicable retreats right when the Sikhs were winning.
Lions led by donkeys. Or rather, lions led by traitors.
It's infuriating to read about in the primary sources. The common soldiers were fighting to the death, weeping when they were forced to retreat, while their aristocratic commanders were selling them out just to secure their own political positions with the British post-war.
And that leads to the humiliating Treaty of Lahore.
Yes, the British install a resident in Lahore, shrink the Sikh army, and take the Jalandhar Doab.
But the Sikhs aren't done yet.
No, the Second Anglo-Sikh War breaks out in 1848. after a local revolt by a governor named Mulraj in Multan spirals out of control. Lord Dalhousie, who is the new super-expansionist governor-general, seizes the opportunity. He declares, "I want war."
And this time, they defeat the Sikhs for good.
In 1849, Punjab is formally annexed to the British Empire.
But here's the historical irony that always gets me. Within just a decade, those exact same defeated Sikh soldiers become the absolute backbone of the British Army.
Yes, they do. The British treated the defeated Sikhs with a lot of martial respect. They didn't dismantle their dignity entirely. They recruited them heavily into their own ranks. So when the Great Revolt of 1857 broke out, the Sikhs actually sided with the British.
Why would they do that after just being conquered?
Partly because they deeply despised the Mughal legacy. Remember the history of Mughal persecution of the Sikh gurus. And partly because they resented the Pourvia soldiers, the sepoys from Bengal and Awadh, who had actively helped the British defeat the Sikhs in the first place.
Oh, wow. The complex web of loyalties. Okay, we've covered the geographic map, east, south, center, west, north. But we need to spend some time talking about the software.
The administrative policies.
Yes, the policies that legally lock this all down. We've mentioned the Subsidiary alliance a few times. I really want to break down how it actually worked, because honestly, it sounds exactly like a mafia protection racket.
It was a protection racket, perfectly legalized. It was masterminded by Lord Wellesley. Yep. So, let's role-play this. Here is the pitch. I, the British governor, come to you, the Indian king. I say, look around. You have enemies. The Marathas want your land. I am your friend. I will station a permanent, highly trained British army right inside your territory to protect you. You don't have to lift a finger. You just have to pay for the upkeep of the troops.
Okay, on the surface, that sounds okay. I get top-tier security.
But then you read the fine print of the treaty.
There's always fine print.
Rule 1. You must instantly fire all other European advisors in your court, especially the French.
Okay, so I lose my alternative options.
Rule 2. You must accept a British resident at your court. He's basically a diplomat, but really he's a spy who dictates your internal politics.
Getting worse.
Rule 3, and this is the absolute kicker. You cannot talk to, negotiate with, or make an alliance with any other Indian ruler without my direct permission.
Wait, so I completely lose my foreign policy. I can't make friends or allies.
You are completely diplomatically isolated. You are an island. And then the financial trap springs. The cost of this British army stationed in your land is astronomical. It's highly inflated. Eventually, you can't make the monthly cash payments.
And what happens when I default?
I say, oh, no problem at all. Just permanently cede a slice of your most fertile revenue-generating territory to me instead of cash.
So I lose land.
And because you lose your best land, your overall revenue drops. So you have even less money the next year. You have to squeeze your peasants with higher taxes. They get angry and revolt.
Then who puts down the revolt?
The British Army, which makes you even more dependent on them to survive against your own people. It's a complete death spiral. Eventually, your state falls into ruin, and the British just officially annex you because you are misgoverning your people.
That is a flawless diabolical trap, pure and simple.
Hyderabad fell for it first in 1798, then Mysore after Tipu died, then Awadh, then the Peshwa. It made the British the paramount power in India without them spending a single penny of their own money. The Indian states paid for their own chains.
It's just staggering. And if that wasn't aggressive enough, a few decades later, Lord Dalhousie comes along with an even more blatant tool, the Doctrine of Lapse.
Right. This was the ultimate legal loophole for land grabbing. So the ancient custom in India was that if a king didn't have a biological son, he could legally adopt a son to inherit the throne and continue the dynasty.
Which is pretty standard practice.
Very standard. But Dalhousie steps in and says, nope, new rules.
I'm changing the game.
He declared that if a ruler of a protected state, meaning a state under British influence, died without a natural biological heir, the state would lapse, meaning it would revert directly to the British company.
What about the adopted sons?
Dalhousie said adopted sons could inherit the private property and the wealth of the king, but they could not inherit the political title or the throne.
And he used this to grab a ton of land, didn't he?
He swept up Satara, Sambalpur, Udaipur, Nagpur. But the most famous one, the one everyone knows, is Jhansi. Yes. The ruler died, and his widow, Rani Laxmibai, pleaded with the British to recognize her adopted son's rights to the throne. Dalhousie completely ignored her and annexed Jhansi.
And that arrogant refusal ended up creating one of the greatest, most fierce leaders of the 1857 revolt.
Exactly. He pushed her into a corner, and she
That
fought
did.
back with legendary bravery.
But there was one state that the British annexed that didn't actually lapse, right? Awadh. They had plenty of heirs.
Yes, Awadh is the great exception, and it highlights the sheer hypocrisy of Dalhousie's policies. Awadh had a long line of heirs, so Dalhousie couldn't use the doctrine of lapse. Instead, he just changed the argument.
What did he say?
He said, "Your Majesty, you are misgoverning your people. The administration is a mess. The peasants are suffering. So out of the goodness of our hearts, we are taking over your kingdom for the good of the people."
Was the administration actually a mess?
Probably. But why was it a mess? Because Awadh had been stuck in a subsidiary alliance for 50 years. The British had been draining their treasury dry to pay for the subsidiary troops. It was a completely self-fulfilling prophecy.
You break their legs and then blame them for not being able to run?
Exactly. They annexed Awadh in 1856, and this was a massive, catastrophic miscalculation by the British,
Why did it backfire so badly?
because All was the primary recruiting ground for the Bengal army of the British East India Company. Most of the sepoys were high-caste farmers from Awadh.
Oh, so their own soldiers were from the kingdom they just stole.
Yes. When the British annexed Awadh, the soldiers felt it personally. The British basically fired their king and taxed their families' lands. The sepoys said, "We fought your wars, we built your empire, and this is how you repay us. You take our homeland." It was a massive spark that lit the fuse for the 1857 revolt just 1 year later.
Incredible. Okay, we're coming toward the end, but we really have to mention relations with the neighboring countries quickly. Because the British weren't just satisfied with the Indian subcontinent, they were paranoid about their borders.
Constantly paranoid. They looked north to Nepal. They fought the Anglo-Nepalese War from 1814 to 1816.
Which ended in the Treaty of Segoli.
Right. And that treaty is important because it gave the British access to the cool hill stations like Shimla, Mussoorie, and Nainital, where they could escape the Indian summer heat. But much more importantly, it started the tradition of recruiting Gorkhas into the British Army.
And the Gorkhas become legendary troops for them. What about the East? Burma.
3 Anglo-Burmese wars over the 19th century. Driven purely by economic greed, the British wanted the rich teak forests of Burma for shipbuilding, and they wanted access to Chinese markets. It ended in the total annexation of Upper Burma in 1885.
And then there's the big bear, Russia, which brings us to Afghanistan.
The Great Game. The British were absolutely terrified that Russia would march through Afghanistan and take India. So in 1839, they decided to proactively invade Afghanistan to install a puppet ruler, Shah Shuja.
The first Afghan war.
It was an unmitigated disaster. It is known as Auckland's Folly, named after the Governor-General. The Afghan tribes rose up, and during the British retreat from Kabul in 1842, an entire British army of about 4,500 troops and 12,000 camp followers was completely wiped out in the snow. Only one man, Dr. Brighton, made it back to a British fort alive.
Just a total catastrophe.
Completely. Later on, they realized they couldn't control Afghanistan directly, so they settled for a buffer state approach. They drew the Durand Line in 1893 to separate British India from Afghanistan, and Lord Curzon later created the Northwest Frontier Province to manage the restless tribal areas.
So when we take a huge step back and look at this entire 80 to 100-year period, we go from a few vulnerable coastal warehouses in Bengal to ruling the entire subcontinent and meddling in Afghanistan. What is the ultimate takeaway for an aspirant?
I think Machiavelli would have been incredibly proud. The British systematically used the lion and the fox. Force and fraud.
Explain that.
They used the lion pure, brutal military force at places like Buxar against Tipu Sultan and against the fierce Sikh Khalsa. But they used the fox cunning, bribery, and legal traps at Plassey with Mir Jafar and through the insidious Subsidiary alliance.
And it all relied on the tragedy of the divided house.
That's the most haunting part of this entire history. The British were never actually strong enough to conquer a fully united India. But they didn't have to be.
Because they just turned everyone against each other.
They conquered the Marathas with the help of the Nizam of Hyderabad. They conquered the brave Sikhs with the help of sepoys from Awadh and Bengal. They conquered India simply because Indian rulers were playing a short-term local game.
How do I destroy my neighbor?
Right. While the British were playing a long-term global game of total economic and political domination.
The Indian kings essentially hired the executioner to kill their rival, completely not realizing that the executioner would inevitably come for them next.
Precisely. It's a profound lesson in strategic unity, or the lack of it. that is honestly still deeply relevant today in geopolitics.
A grand chess game played with gunpowder, fake treaties, and compound interest. Well, that is a wrap on the expansion and consolidation of British power in India.
It's a heavy, complex topic,
Yeah,
but absolutely essential for understanding the foundation of modern India.
it really is. Before we sign off, a final reminder. This deep dive was powered by the Simplified UPSC by PPP channel. If you want to master the syllabus and truly understand these concepts, that is exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment with your biggest takeaway from today's session.
And if you are capable, please support the Patreon. It really does keep this high-level content flowing.
Don't forget to check the public Telegram channel for those free notes and PYQs. And if you are serious about this, if you want the premium notes, the organized library, the model mains answers DM on the public channel to join the private group, invest in your prep. It makes a difference.
Consolidation is key in imperial history and in your study plan.
Haha, nice callback. Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.
Goodbye and good luck with your studies.